your script. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the common data types you'll be using in GDScript. In GDScript, you'll find yourself using strings, numbers, usually referred to as integers, floats, booleans, and the no value. Here are some pseudocode to show you how these values are represented directly in the code. Notice how hello world, or the string value of hello world, is contained in double quotations. The double quotations are important because it lets the compiler know that this is in fact a string value. For numbers, notice how we can have negative and positive integers along with the number 0. One thing to keep in mind is that there are no decimal points, unlike the float values. Float values are similar to integer values. The only difference is the decimal point. For booleans, you only have two values, the true and false value. Lastly, for no, you just have no, written out exactly as that. Data type. String is a data type used in programming and is used to represent text rather than numbers. It is comprised of a set of characters that can also contain space. Here are a few examples of what a string literal would look like typed out in. Notice the double quotations. Next we have the sentence, I have 0 cats. Notice how we can use numbers as well in our string literals. And lastly, we can have a string of just numbers. However, keep in mind that we cannot use these for mathematical operations. One thing to keep in mind is that string numbers do not have the same value as integer values. For example, a string value 1 plus the string value of 1 does not equal the integer 1 plus the integer 1. One thing to keep in mind is that string values do not equal integer values when it comes to numbers. So the string value of 1 plus string value of 1 will behave differently than the integer value of 1 plus the integer value of 1. In the case of the integer value, 1 plus 1 will equal 2, whereas the string value of 1 plus the string value of 1 will equal 11. The compiler will just combine the two strings and put them into a single string. So 1 with the other string value 1 next to it. Next we have the integer data type. An integer is a data type that represents some range of mathematical whole numbers. Different programming languages have different ranges. This is the range Godot has. You're allowed to use any of the integer values in this range right here. This is Godot's integer range. In Godot,
oh, looks like I found another base. What's all this then? Oh yeah, it's locked in on both sides there. Here's a little look.
You will overflow and wrap around. For example, if you take the maximum value and add 1, what you'll do is you'll overflow, wrap around, and come out with the minimum value in the range. Let's take a look at what overflow and wraparound means. So if you take the minimum value and subtract 1, what you will do instead is get the maximum value for that range. That
Real question is, do I think there's
overflow and
anything in here
wraparound
worth
looks like.
taking? Probably
The
not.
same can be true for taking the maximum
Did
value
they get this
possible.
door? Oh!
Value of
They
1.
didn't even get this door!
If you take the maximum value
Sweet, free
and
base.
add 1, what you will do is
Wow.
wrap around to the lowest value possible. Let's go ahead and take a look at other
Free nails.
integer literal examples.
It's free real
As you can
estate.
see, we can do positive numbers, negative numbers, and the 0 value. Again, keep in mind that integers are whole numbers. Basically, they are numbers without a decimal point. Next in the list is the float data type. A float data type is a floating point number, which means it is a number that has a decimal place. Floats are used when you want more precision. Here are a few examples of float literals: 12.32, negative 5.01, and 0.0. Keep in mind that all float values have a decimal point. Without the decimal point, what you will do instead is turn these numbers into integer numbers. Next is the Boolean data type. The Boolean is a data type that has one of two possible values, either true or false. The true or false values are used to represent two truth values of logic and Boolean algebra. In GDScript, when converted to numeric values, false becomes 0 and true becomes 1. If you were to convert these into float values, false would become 0.0, while true becomes 1.0. Keep that in mind. Booleans are pretty simple. Here are examples of what a Boolean literal would look like written out in GDScript. They're fairly straightforward. All you have to do is type either true or type false. Notice that there are no double quotations around these, as that would turn them into string values. Last is the null data type. The null data type is used to represent the absence of data. In GDScript, null is an empty data type that contains no information, cannot be assigned any other value. Nulls are pretty straightforward. All you have to do is type out null to the compiler to let it know that this is a null data type. That's it for this episode.
It can be a memory or a feeling.
You did some great stuff up there today.
Some days, you just need it. Comfort for every moment. Snuggle Super Fresh with 5-in-1 odor elimination.
Let's take a look at the dictionary definition of a variable. In computer programming, a variable, also called a scalar, is a storage address paired with an associated symbolic name which contains a known or unknown quantity of information, often referred to as a value. In layman's term, a variable is a container that contains a value. Now, how exactly do we go about creating a variable? Well, in GDScript, to write a variable, you type out the keyword var, spelled V-A-R, followed by a unique name. This is important because a variable cannot have a name that already exists in your script. Now, to write a variable, you simply write out the keyword var, spelled V-A-R, followed by your unique name, and everything in yellow is mandatory. However, everything in the parentheses is completely optional. This means you can create a variable that is empty, or you can assign your variable a literal value or data object using the assignment operator, which is represented by the equal sign symbol. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at two examples. In the first example, you can see here we've created a variable called player health, and we've assigned it with the assignment operator the literal value, in this case the literal integer value of 100. You can also create the same variable without assigning a value. In this case, we've created a variable called player health, and we have not assigned it any value. As a matter of fact, if we do not assign a value to our variables, they will contain the data type null by default. And again, variables must have unique names or an error is thrown. In GDScript, you can also use something called typed variables. A typed variable is just a data type that is explicitly declared on your variable by adding the colon symbol followed by the data type in which you wish to limit your variable. In this case, the first example is a variable called life points, and using the colon sign symbol followed by the int keyword, what we're saying is that our variable called life points can only have integer values assigned to it. Declaring data types on variables is usually considered good practice, as it leaves less room for confusion on the purpose of the specific variable. Assigning a value that is not the declared type will throw an error. Let's go ahead and take a quick look. In this case, we have a variable called text, and we've explicitly assigned it the data type of string, and we are trying to assign it a literal integer value of 10. This line of code will not work because it will in fact throw an error because GDScript is expecting a string data type to be assigned to our variable called value. Convert the integer value 10 into a string value 10. The second example, we have a variable called a num, and we assign it the string value 10 as an integer. What this does is it converts our string value of 10 into an integer value of 10. Lastly, we have a variable called num float with the declared data type of float, and we assign it the value of the integer value 10 as a float. And again, this will convert our integer value of 10 into a float, which will then be assigned to our variable called numFloat. Common data types you may find yourself using with your typed variables include integers, booleans, strings, and floats. Instead of typing them out, you can also infer the data type onto your variable by the value or literal value you are assigning into that variable. For example, we have a variable called a number, and we are assigning and inferring